Okay, that was loud in my headphones at least. Maybe it's not really that loud in real life. Okay, this is The Grass is Greener on WXRW 104.1 FM in Milwaukee. I am the host of the program, Gary Grass. With me is my co-host, Babette Gruneau.
Hi, and tonight we were going to have Alex Lawson with Social Security Works, but then all this news started happening. Internationally, Israel broke the ceasefire in Gaza, the U.S. started bombing in Yemen, and there's a possible partial ceasefire maybe in the conflict in Ukraine. So we asked a special guest to join us, Larry Johnson, who is a former anti-terrorism official. He is currently an analyst and consultant and a patriot. And he blogs at Sonar21. He's joining us this evening, just back from a trip to Russia, I believe. So welcome, Larry Johnson.
Hi there. Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Hi. Okay. I hope we got the intro about right.
Yeah, it's close enough for government work.
All right. Excellent. I don't know what you want to talk about first. I Betsy went through and watched the entire interview that you had with Sergei Lavrov. Andrew Napolitano was there, and Mario Nafa was there. And we could talk about that a little, or you could talk about just the stuff that's breaking out all over the place. Wherever you want to begin.
I'm at your service. You just tell me what you want, and I'll be like the organ grinder's monkey. You crank the accordion, and I'll dance.
All right. Well, why don't we start with Russia? Because I understand that there were talks between President Trump and
Putin.
President Putin.
Yeah.
And
today, yes, they had a phone call today.
They did, and something may have come out of it.
We're doing this on the 18th, by the way, just for the record. And I heard about this, like, the call was ongoing, and they were on their third or fourth hour when I heard about this.
They talked for about 90 minutes.
Oh,
a little over 90 minutes.
Okay. Well, the news I had was, it's still going on. It's still going on, and people were picturing Putin, talking about the entirety of Russian history. So.
Well, yeah. Actually, Lavrov made a joke about that during our conversation with him last Monday. Because he was recounting the history of Russia's failed attempts to join NATO.
And
the different times they've been betrayed by both the United States and by NATO. And then he paused. He says, "Hey, I'm sorry. I don't mean to get into history, but he said, at least I'm not doing the history dump like President Putin did with Tucker Carlson."
Yeah.
So I stayed away from the 13th century. So he had a sense of humor.
Yeah.
Very
No.
pleasant.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Americans don't like history the way Russians do.
Yeah, I did notice that
if we'd been invaded, 3 times in the last 200 years and had lost 27 million people in one of those invasions, I think we'd remember.
Yeah, it tends to have a certain impression on you if that happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the talks today between Putin and Trump. Trump came away with nothing of substance.
Okay.
Putin agreed, and it was touted as, this was a major concession, and I'm here to tell you it wasn't.
Okay.
That Russia would not carry out any attacks on infrastructure and electrical generator sites over the next 30 days. Well, the fact of the matter is, Russia's only been attacking them about every 30 days anyway. So they've just had a recent attack in the last week or so. So it's no big deal. Said, okay.
They won't be due for one for a while anyways.
So they're quote, giving up something that they were going to give up anyway. That's number one.
Yeah. We've seen in the past when something happens and Ukraine drone attacks some apartment building in Moscow or something, they don't retaliate immediately, and they'll sit and give it a little while and pick the time and target of their choosing. So it's if something were to happen in the next 30 days, they could.
If Ukraine does not respect the ceasefire, and you're correct, if they start launching drones at Russian energy or infrastructure, then Russia will retaliate. President Putin in June of 2024, almost a year ago, laid out very clearly what Russia's position was. He said, we'll be happy to negotiate and negotiate an end to the war, but before we start negotiations, several things have to happen. One, Ukraine needs to withdraw its troops from Kherson, Zaporizhia, Luhansk, and Donetsk. Two, Ukraine needs to renounce ever joining NATO. Three, Ukraine needs to have new elections because Vladimir Putin is not a legitimate president. They do not have a constitutional leader who's legally entitled to rule right now. Four, they
need to get rid of
withdraw
Zelensky.
the legislation.
Zelensky can run again. Zelensky can run again. They just cannot, deal with him now until he's constitutionalized. He postponed
the election.
Yeah,
right.
He not postponed. He canceled the election and just declared an emergency. I get to stay as president. So when I met with, along with Judge Napolitano and Mario Nafal, when we met with Sergei Lavrov last Monday, I asked him specifically, I said, is that really Russia's position, or do you got room here to move? And he came back, no, that's it. That's our position. So Russia hasn't moved off of that. So this notion that the United States came up with Ukraine and said, 30-day ceasefire, just, stop firing, everybody will go to their corners and rest, and then we'll see if we can negotiate something. Russia said, no way. We're not going to do that. If you want to do that, do what we've said needs to be done first. You do that, then we can start negotiating and talk about ending the fighting. But the fighting is not going to end until all Western military aid, financial aid, and weapons are cut off, or intelligence are ended. So until that takes place, we'll keep fighting. Now, the good news is Trump came away from the meeting feeling good about it, that they're making progress, and they did make it clear that they're not going to talk to Zelensky, neither side, and they're not going to talk to the Europeans, which has just thrown Europe and Zelensky into a meltdown.
So does Europe include the United Kingdom in that?
Yeah, they're irrelevant. The era in which Europe matters, truly matters, where they actually have a military that's worth something. That ended 20 years ago.
Well, do you think they know that?
They're window dressing now.
Do you think they've realized that yet?
Oh, no. They're still, if you've ever been around a 3-year-old kid playing dress up, whether pretending to be a nurse or a doctor or a policeman or a firefighter or whatever, the kid really believes it.
But
I remember strapping on, a cowboy hat, cowboy boots, and a fake cap pistol back when I was 4. I wouldn't say they're completely irrelevant, though. I mean, as a military force, right? They're at this point insignificant. They're all drawn down to nothing from this conflict. Right.
They're exhausted, right? They've been neglecting their militaries for years, just relying on the United States to bail them out of anything. But you know, they are not completely irrelevant because there's still NATO, there's still Article 5. If you have if they put troops on the ground, that is a trigger for a potential nuclear conflict there. So I mean, that's
So
they're
let me ask you first a question.
yes.
How many people can get into Green Bay Packers Stadium?
Uh, You know what? I'm gonna irritate some people here, but say I've never been a fan. I've never been to Lambeau Field, and I've never desired to go.
Sorry to put you on the spot there,
Yeah.
dude. Well, I think it's closer to like 80, 90,000.
Hmm.
Um, so you could fit the entire British Army at Lambeau Field and still have some empty seats to sell. Okay, so let's put that into perspective. Number one, uh, you you simply ask yourself, what is it that Europe brings to the table? Well, Article 5 is a problem because it requires one, a country to be attacked without, innocent, they're the innocent victim. They've
Hmm.
been the victim of aggression.
Okay.
And once that happens, then each country has to assemble the legislature and to vote whether, oh yes, we're going to send our troops to war or not. So that's problematic there. Um, Europe doesn't contain any significant natural resources. There's nothing that some other country in the world sitting around going, oh my God, do I have my box of champagne from France yet? Or if I don't get it, we'll die. That's not going on. And financially, they're strapped. They're in debt
Oh.
in a major ways that people like Alex Craner and Tom Luongo expect that England very well could face collapse this year. So we come back to it. They're talking tough, like, oh yeah, France. Right now, only the UK, France, and Denmark have said that they would, if there's a ceasefire, they'd put troops inside Ukraine. But the problem is, the Russians said, you put your troops inside Ukraine, we'll kill you. You'll be a military target. So, the it would be it's that great internet acronym FAFO.
Yes.
Indeed.
F around and
Mm-hmm.
F find out.
And
Yes.
find out.
Yes. Can't say the whole thing on the radio.
Right, right.
FCC. Right.
That's why I
Yeah.
just went with initials.
FAFO, yes, yes. I've learned so many acronyms over the internet over the last year, um, but yeah. I mean, I think that's I mean, I think I've seen them do enough ridiculous things that I would still be a little concerned just because um, they do act out like 3-year-old children,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's clear that there are NATO personnel running around in the country right now, and if there's this kind of we've seen this kind of BS where it's like they negotiate a ceasefire amongst themselves, and then they could just pretend that there's a ceasefire and put people into to stabilize, to enforce the ceasefire that Russia never signed on to, and then it's like it's disaster time.
Right,
and
right.
these are the thing that they do have in terms of a military is they still have ballistic missiles. I mean, someone said,
Yes.
Britain wants support in Odessa. They're going to send peacekeepers there now. It's like, I'm not familiar with the peacekeeper. Can you tell me its range and yield, please? Because I haven't kept up with their arsenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. No, you're looking at it the correct way. Um, they're going to do everything they can to try to sabotage this deal. But the problem is the Russian military is getting stronger, not weaker, with each passing day. The Ukrainian military, by contrast, is getting weaker, not stronger, and they don't have a path forward for getting stronger. So, up in Kursk, essentially the Ukrainians are a small group about estimated 2,000 to 3,000 are surrounded. and are not giving up, but there are reportedly 30 NATO officers, American, uh,
Mhm.
French, and Polish, I believe.
So
Um,
that's why.
that's the one that Clinton, that the Trump pled
Yeah,
with Putin to spare their lives.
that's what I was
Um,
wondering about. If that's why he was begging for their lives.
yeah, yeah. I mean, he was um, uh, asking Putin not to do it. Now, um, Putin said, "Okay, all they got to do is surrender, and we'll treat them according to international law." But Zelensky or General Syrskyi, the head of the Ukrainian armed forces, is going to have to order them to surrender. And they've got until Monday morning at 6 a.m. Moscow time to do it. Well, that's uh, about a day and a half ago. They didn't do it. And so Russia is proceeding with its attack on those positions.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to a Ukrainian analyst, a few weeks back, who, it's like, the things are really, falling apart for Ukraine. I mean, I don't know how close they are to like really falling apart, but they've got this economic crisis, a political crisis. They've got a demographic crisis. They've got a recruitment crisis. They have a military crisis, and I asked him like, well, where are they? Why do they think they're gonna win? It's like, what is their like scenario that they can possibly see pulling out of this? And it's like, well,
Mm-hmm.
they think, well, a lot of them have these hopes that, like, well, Russia will falter very soon. They're on the verge of collapse. It's like, that's like, we won't have to worry about, restocking or repopulating our armed forces, because Russians just got to collapse, and then it won't take very much.
It sounds like they're
Yeah.
dreaming.
Well, they're engaged with delusion. Are you acquainted with the movie Downfall? Oh,
No,
that
no.
was the movie. Uh, it's actually used as a popular meme because it's about Hitler, final
Oh,
days in the bunker, and uh, they're they have this scene where the generals, he's around the map and he's doing orders and giving these commands to non-existent armies. And
mhm.
finally, one of the generals tells him, "Sir, there are no armies," and he erupts in a great anger and is yelling, throws everybody out of the room except for two of them, and just goes nuts. Well, that frankly is sort of the situation Ukraine is in now, and
It's
um,
actually the situation of a lot of liberals in the United States who, really love waving that flag, and or it's gonna be. I mean, they're still they haven't reached the fit stage. They're still commanding invisible armies.
yeah, well, that's another thing I just don't get. It used to be that to be a liberal was to be against the war, and I'm all fine with that. I think we've got. Uh, I'm becoming that classical liberal in my old age because I've seen too much of the lies, the deceit, the persistent claim that we're fighting this war or that war to save democracy. When in fact, what we're doing is killing a bunch of women and children for nothing. And I'm tired of it. I think we got to stop. And uh, this the liberals today, good God, they're they're lined up, ready to go to war,
You should see the
and
peace
still,
community. It's the same way, and at least part of it, and it's very disturbing to see people who are supposed to be for peace out there, waving their Ukrainian flag and saying, basically saying that they want to keep the war going, and it's just like, what are you talking about? Don't you know you're supposed to
There's
be for
one way to
peace?
end this war, and it's for Putin to withdraw from everything and give back Crimea. And
I've
it's
heard
like,
that so many
I
times, and
mean,
it's just,
I know.
oh,
well, you know what? If someone who was making that argument then would be consistent and say, and furthermore, we're going to require all current American citizens to go back to their original countries because we're giving what is now known as the United States back to the original inhabitants. Then everybody'd go, whoa, 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 wait a second.
I
Not
know
so
maybe
fast.
one of the people who might say that.
You go at least back to the
So-
Mexican War and give back Mexico. I mean, just at least that
the
far.
Mexicans have a legitimate beef, Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California. Yeah, that was part of Mexico, and we just up and took it.
Yeah,
And said, it's ours.
we had a really nifty like settler plan where we settled a chunk of Mexico, bought up, people bought up the land, then they declared independence because they didn't want to pay Mexican taxes on their land, and then we said, oh yeah, this is nice, it's like we'll just we'll help you fight your defend you in your revolution against Mexico, and then we'll just annex you. I mean people who are very skeptical of Donetsk and Lugansk joining Russia would say, well, this is the Texas game, except that those people were already there. This wasn't like this wasn't a thing that they were there before there was a Ukraine. I mean, it was before
that
there
was. In fact, a friend of mine, he was a graduate of West Point in 1974, and he did 14 years with the U.S. Army. He was president of the Russian club at West Point, and his family were immigrants from Russia, and some came during the Soviet times, some came before the Soviet times, but one of his great grandfathers was from Galicia. Well, Galicia is over in the far western part of what we now know as Ukraine. And he said, anytime anybody suggested to his great grandfather that he was Ukrainian, he'd get mad and yell. He says, "No,
Polish.
I'm Russian."
Russian. Oh,
So,
okay. I thought you were going to say Polish.
Well, and let's recognize Kiev. Kiev was the site where the Christian church, Christianity, entered Russia, and that was the center of Russian culture for about 500 years until they moved into Moscow in the 14th century. So, from like 989 until, I guess 400 years later, they then moved the capital from Kiev to Moscow.
Yeah.
So this is, this area has been Russian for a lot longer than America has even existed as a country.
I mean, you hear these arguments going on. I mean, von Clausewitz has a line that he always likes to use where he says, the Ukrainian theory is that it's its own grandfather, because it's like it's well, Kiev is older than Moscow. It's like, yeah, but it was founded by a Russian guy. So it's like, what's your,
Well, you're right. You're absolutely right. It is older than Moscow because that's where Russia started.
Mm-hmm.
So
do you think it'll be returning
the problem is
soon?
We on the one hand, we like to claim that we're against Nazis, and yet we are completely enabling Nazis right now in Ukraine.
Right.
Well, and have been promoting that since at least 91, right? This was the Brzezinski plan all along, right? You laid this all out.
Yeah.
You find the craziest people who are going to be the most vehement anti-Russians you can find, and who is that? Well, that's the Nazis. That's the really diehard ultra nationalists.
One of the arguments we frequently hear in the United States is that Russia is this great ambitious imperial power, eager to go out and conquer other countries. Okay, so let's do a test. How many foreign military bases does Russia have right now in other countries outside of Russia and outside of its immediate frontier?
I know of one in Syria.
2.
Yeah.
Pardon?
I said I know of one in Syria.
Yeah. So you got one in Syria. And I forget where the other one is. And they're talking about building a naval base down in Sudan. Okay.
Yeah.
How many military bases does the United States have overseas?
It's an uncountable number because we have so many
Seven.
outposts that you can't tell whether they're. I mean, I've seen some estimates. I mean, back during the Afghan War, they were counting probably every tent as a base, and they said it was up to 8,000. But the more conventional
Well, no,
figure is like
we got,
800.
well, right now we got legitimately 752.
Okay.
Wow.
That's okay. So now come back and say, now who's the imperialist?
Yeah. I mean. Yeah. I
Who's
mean.
building military bases overseas? It's us, not them.
I mean.
And in
Yeah.
fact, this entire war is in part because we've been insisting on expanding NATO towards Russia. And even though they've warned repeatedly over the last 30 years, don't do it. And right now, we're building the largest base in Europe in Romania, and we have bases already in Poland. And those both of the two locations, the one location in Romania and the one in Poland, have missiles. The Aegis missile system that normally is on a naval ship, but they've got a land-based version that is capable. They're nuclear capable, and so Russia's looking at that, going, no, because if the Russians deployed a similar system in Mexico or Canada,
Hmm.
do you think we'd be a little concerned?
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't have to like imagine because we had the Cuban
The
Missile
Cuban Missile
Crisis,
Crisis. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
Same.
yeah, and
Same
and
thing.
and and then you see the same kind of scenario where we want to arm Taiwan to the teeth, right? And it's like
Right.
this is, I mean, we're constantly trying to wring our rivals and adversaries with weapons, and uh, it turns out that they don't like it, and it's not we're constantly trying to provoke conflict, and one of the things that I mean, I at least read a summary of your long interview with Lavrov, and kind of an analysis of like how Russia sees its foreign policy, and I mean, it's not stirring up trouble. Russia and has a very pragmatic. It has a very realist view of, and using realist in the technical sense. It has a realist foreign policy.
Mm-hmm.
Countries pursue their interests. I've heard some people, use the word realist where they don't are like mixing back and forth between the technical term and the ordinary term. Like, well, they'll have someone who's like a neo-realist in terms of their international relations theory, and then they'll say, well, that doesn't seem very realistic to me. But I mean, but yeah, our nations pursue their interests, and it's like Trump is very open about this. I mean, there's a, he embraces this outwardly, whereas our previous leaders may have something sort of a kind of quasi-realist outlook, but they always pretend that we're caring about democracy and human rights and all this other stuff, and really we're just out to grab whatever they think is in the interests of the country, and
Right.
often a very, very distorted view of what they think is in the interest of the country. Because, I mean, as these other countries that are like act like adults sort of recognize, it's like they have a large interest in just having friendly relations with people and not trying to become the policeman of the world, the hegemon, the superpower. They want to just have their own security, which they can achieve some of that by promising other countries their security. So if everyone feels secure, no one has to fight each other. They can all have trade. They can look for common ground, and they can have mechanisms to settle disputes, because they're going to be in conflict sometimes, and they're going to have to work those things out. Um, but it's like, the way the U.S. has been going about things for decades now, it's been stirring up trouble. We stir up trouble in Syria. We stir up trouble in the China Sea. We stir up trouble in on the Russian near abroad, and it's just everything everywhere all at once.
Yeah. Well, the cynical explanation of that is that we always need to come up with some sort of foreign enemy, foreign threat, so we can justify now it's almost $1 trillion uh, defense budget. And it doesn't matter whether we win or lose. And the fact of the matter is, we have
Yeah.
not won a major war uh, since the end of World War II. We didn't win in Korea.
Yeah.
We didn't win in Vietnam. If you want to call Iraq a victory, good luck with that. Afghanistan, we got chased out of Afghanistan. So at some point, we ought to step back
Yeah.
and go,
Well,
okay, maybe
we won
this isn't
Syria.
working.
I mean, look at the. I mean, the places where we win are the ones that are the worst off. One thing that people don't often appreciate is the countries that we go after, that we say are the worst countries, are always the ones that have like the best education system in the region, like the best healthcare in the region, the most rights for women in the region, and those are the ones that we selectively go after, and then when we leave, they have ethnic cleansing and open air slave markets and
Like
all.
Libya.
It's this is and then this is what we have to show for it. But
Yeah.
in one sense, Julian Assange was right. The goal is not a successful war. The goal is a long and expensive war that can keep the money flowing.
I want
Yeah.
to move on to some of the other conflicts, uh, such as Israel breaking the ceasefire. Um, it looked like,
Another semi-mythical ceasefire.
yeah, uh,
Right.
because they had never thoroughly
Observed it.
right.
Well, so this break in the ceasefire, I believe, was coordinated with the Trump administration and had the full backing of the Trump administration in doing it. Sad to say. When Steve Witkoff, Trump's emissary, negotiated the ceasefire, he coerced Israel into accepting it. Israel didn't want to, but the United States got to call the shots on that. And Israel acquiesced. And as a result of that, we got multiple hostages released. The hostages Hamas and other Palestinian groups were holding, several of them were released. And then the hostages that Israel's been holding in prison, they were also released. And you think, okay, good, we're on our way. But and when that ceasefire was announced, the Houthis in Yemen stopped attacking ships in the Red Sea. So now jump ahead to the Ides of March, March 15th, Saturday. The United States launches an unprovoked attack on the Houthis. And we killed a bunch of women and children. And so once again, now the United States, when you use violence against non-combatants, against civilians for political purposes, the definition of that is terrorism. And that definition was first presented by a fellow named Bibi Netanyahu back in 1985, I believe. He's being interviewed by William F. Buckley. And, it's one of the few times I can say I fully agree with Bibi Netanyahu. His definition was exactly correct. So now the United States has launched this attack, and at the same time, we've issued a warning to Iran. You better watch out, you're next. Well, in fact, what's happened is I think the Trump administration has made the decision that it's going to follow through and attack Iran. That's the stupidest thing we could ever do, but it looks like we're going to do it. And
So we're looking for an excuse.
If we do that, you're going to see Iran will shoot down a number of our aircraft and missiles that the U.S. planned to destroy all of Iran's nuclear facilities, which are peaceful. They're not building a nuke, even though the claim is that they are. Then Iran will proceed to hit U.S. military bases. There's one at Al Udeid Air Force Base. I've been there. It's just across the Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz from Russia, from Iran. It's an easy target. There's no air defense capable of shooting down Iranian missiles. So this has a great possibility to erupt into a war. And then the United States is forgetting that Iran just signed a security agreement, basically for getting Russia to protect it. They did that on January 17th, 3 days before Trump was sworn in. In addition, I think this last week marked the end of the 7th joint military exercise that featured Russia, China, and Iran. So any attack on Iran could likely precipitate the involvement of Russia getting involved, and possibly the Chinese. So this is, I think the Trump administration is playing a very dangerous game with this.
So are they looking for an excuse to get Iran maybe to react, or
Yes.
to have some,
No, I think you said it perfectly.
I think
that's exactly what they're doing.
That's been the scenario all over. I mean, that was the scenario with Russia and Ukraine, where there was like consistent provocation. That was the scenario for the Korean War, and this is the scenario over and over again, right? The U.S., though there's always an escalation that precedes the war, and then the propaganda says that the war began when they responded to us, right? Whatever their response was, that was the first day of the war. They started it, because the propaganda always requires them to be the ones that started the war and us to be the bad guys who are forced to react because now we have to do something because of their perfidy.
Yeah, we've in this particular case, there's been a lot of pressure. Oh heavens, more than 20 years of worth of pressure to start to come up with a good reason to attack Iran, and it looks like it's going to happen this time, unfortunately. So, and if we do, while we continue, Donald Trump believes sincerely that the United States has the biggest, baddest army around. Well, that's sorry to say, that's not true.
Their information is just a little dated.
Yeah, our army is not quite as capable as we like to believe, and if we get into this kind of conflict with Iran, it's gonna get Trump bogged down in a war that he promised he wasn't going to do.
I mean, you look at
going to be the peace president.
You look at all the adversaries that we've had, right? I mean, we've stepped it up from the Panama and Grenada days, but we're still, we're not going out.
We're going back to Panama.
We're not fighting top tier adversaries, and Russia was holding off all of NATO and winning.
That's exactly right. We couldn't defeat goat herders in Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, don't underestimate goat herders.
No. They are some formidable fighters, and they've proven it throughout history. The Brits made the mistake back in the 19th century. They went in, they went in raping and pillaging, and then all of a sudden the Afghan people rose up and chased. I think it was something like a 16,000 man force that tried to march from Kabul to get to Pakistan, and when they arrived, there's only like 5 of them left. So, wow. The Afghan have a heritage of being good warriors. But my point is, even with all of our technological sophistication, we couldn't defeat them. And notice that since December of 2023, we've been firing missiles and dropping bombs on Yemen to stop their attacks on shipping. And how did that turn out? We were unable to stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the Trump administration believes that that's because the Biden team was so weak. But the fact, as I look
Yeah.
at it, uh, we did everything that was within our capability militarily, short of dropping a nuke, and we were unable to defeat them. And so I think Trump's going to have to learn the same hard lesson. We're not militarily equipped to defeat the Houthis.
I mean, it's very worrisome to hear, and well, it's not a surprise, right? But it's worrisome to think about how Trump will need to relearn things.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that you saw in the um, Israel's attacks on Gaza is the responses of these third parties, and then of course they attack everyone, right? I mean, they invaded Syria, they attacked Lebanon, they're just attacking everyone. They had a couple attacks on Iran, and the way the attacks on Iran played out, where there was this sort of like very choreographed, like agreed upon tit for tat, right? Where it says, well, you can retaliate, but only to this extent. We'll consider this much a reprisal, and if you do just that, we'll stop it there, right? So there's this choreographed, playing down, stepping back out of it with very, very measured violence, right? Um, and
Right.
and that was a fair about the most mature resolution you can imagine to this setting, right? It wasn't bloodless. Well, maybe it was bloodless. It was very close to bloodless, at least. I think there were a couple, one or two sort of stray Israelis that didn't leave when they were told to evacuate. That wound up getting clobbered. But it was very, 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 very very, very measured and very, very maturely carried out. And I just can't imagine Trump, um, you know, thinking to even do that. I mean, the people around him are, if anything, even nuttier than the people that were around Biden. Biden, you had, these horrible warmongers, but they at least, understood some limits and realized that, they couldn't bite off every single war at once. They couldn't simultaneously attack, Russia and China and have another war in the Middle East. And it's like, I don't know what Trump knows. I don't know what his limits are or what he understands.
Yeah, it's unfortunate they sent Tulsi Gabbard overseas, so she's not at home to help make sure he's getting the right intelligence. And so it very well could be presenting him with false intelligence. This is, again, I hope I'm wrong, but it certainly looks like Trump is sending the signals that he's going to take military action against Iran. And if he does that, as I've written at sonar21.com, it's likely to destroy his presidency. Any hope of him having a legacy of being the peacemaker will be out the door.
The peacemaking didn't last very long. But do you think that this was cooked up with Israel all along? That this, okay, you have a ceasefire so I can get my inauguration in, you keep it for a little while after that, and then you're free to do whatever. And
Cool it
I'll
down
move
while the
in.
cameras.
Yeah.
I want all the cameras on me. I want everything to be nice for my inauguration. After that, we can go back to status quo ante.
And once you've
Yeah,
cleared out the area, I'll come in and set up Gaza for like a Riviera.
Yeah.
well, again, he talked about building a resort in Gaza and creating a new Nakba, a forced evacuation of the Palestinians. But he's going to do that without putting any troops on the ground. And so, the reality is that Trump is making a lot of promises that he's not actually going to be able to keep.
Yeah.
And um, again, I think he's chosen a very dangerous, counterproductive course of action, and it's going to come back and bite him in the rear end.
One of the things about Trump that's always very alarming is, he will massively overstate what he wants to do sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and it's like, oh, this is just a negotiating strategy. He's, this is what he laid out in his book. You make a really, really high demand and you fight, fight, fight for it, and then you wind up accepting less later, and but that's okay because you still get what you want, right? You get what you really wanted all along. You may not get what you asked for, but you get what you really needed. Um, but he also just like really does sometimes, just do things that would seem insane to most people. And so he's a wild card, and I think Mark Sloboda always calls him a chaos bomb, because he is unpredictable, and
Yes.
Russia, is going to talk with him now. They're going to try to figure him out as best they can. They're going to try to get him to commit to things. But I think they were, this is what they expressed, is that they were very, very unsettled with the idea of Trump, because particularly when you're dealing with nuclear powers, you just want consistency. You want to understand what's going to happen. You want, predictability, reliability. You want to know
Yeah,
what you can do.
that's the word.
and
That's
and
the word,
and you and you want
predictability.
normalcy, right? And I guess they felt that the Biden administration was an aberration from normalcy, and they're hoping that they can get Trump to something normal, but he's not a very good figure for normalcy.
Well, he thinks he can achieve everything by force, of personality, by threats, and then even by use of military force. But I think he's gonna find out if he carries through with the threats to attack Iran, that's going to end very badly for the United States, I fear.
It won't be very good for Iran either, or anyone in that region, I would think.
No, no, it'll again. It has the United States is I think grossly underestimating the power of Iran to fight back.
Hmm. Yeah.
They recognize that they're in the crosshairs, and they've been preparing accordingly. And they have a pretty robust air defense system that is better than anything any of our pilots have ever faced. And if we do try to use piloted aircraft inside Iranian territory, one or two of them are going to get shot down, if not more. And then all of a sudden, if you've got living pilots that are prisoners of war or treated as terrorists, it's going to escalate tensions, and then Trump will feel compelled to respond. And then we get into a situation where we could see Russia intervene on behalf of Iran. So I say this can get out of control real quick.
And you need to have mature people that will rein things back, or preferably rein things back before they start and not start them. Um, I
Yeah, you
just
need. I call it the Dutch uncle. You need that Dutch uncle, somebody that's going to come in and tell you the hard truths. You may not want to hear it, but once you hear it, at least you've been warned, and you might have a chance to say, okay, yeah, thanks for the advice. I'm not going to do that.
Jürgen van Voort.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
I did want to ask a bit more about what you see for uh, Israel Palestine, if there is any hope that this won't just be another Nakba, that this won't just be even worse.
Well, it presupposes if you believe that the Israeli army is strong enough that it can kill all the Palestinians and force them from Gaza and the West Bank, then if you're an Israeli policymaker, you might take a shot at it. But we've got more than 15, 16 months of evidence before us that from October of 2023 through the middle of January of 2025. So that's October, November, December, 15 months, 16 months. Israel, despite claiming it was going to destroy Hamas, failed completely. And we saw that failure when
Hamas is
the
bigger than
Israeli
it was before.
Hostages were released. You saw the Hamas soldiers out in crisp uniforms, carrying weapons, well disciplined.
Displaying their captured Israeli armor.
Yeah. So it's Israel is a reserve army. It's not a very good army, even though they keep telling themselves they're the best. They're a little bit like that old character on Saturday Night Live, Stuart Smalley. You're the best. And gosh darn it, I like you.
And gosh darn it, people like me. Right?
Yeah.
Daily affirmation with Stuart Smalley.
That's sort of Israel. And again, they're fighting unarmed Palestinians.
Except to make themselves feel bigger, they don't talk to a mirror. They invade some other country so they can have some little success.
Yeah, like Syria, or they just pulverize the civilian areas in Gaza or the West Bank.
Lebanon.
Yeah. So I mean, they've when you're fighting, when you're able to go out and kill unarmed civilians, you can't beat unarmed civilians. Who can you beat? But it comes at a cost, and the Israeli, not all Israeli soldiers are heartless psychopaths. A large number are still human beings, and they've suffered great emotional crises over the damage that they've inflicted, and there have been several suicides. So it's had a devastating effect on the Israeli military.
I've heard that a lot don't want to go back for another round of it.
I mean, people have avoided that by leaving the country altogether. There's been
some have. Yeah, a significant number have. And but Israel internally it's also got a big split. Just today there was a big anti-war protest in central Jerusalem, and the police had to come out and are beating fellow Israeli citizens.
Wow.
So,
that's it's encouraging that they have an anti-war protest. I mean, there was.
Yeah.
Well, you've had more refuseniks coming up lately. It's like you've had more people that have been very vocal about it that have gotten out of the news.
I mean, I understand here in the U.S. there were a number of protests. I attended one here in Milwaukee that had at least a few hundred people marching around Milwaukee, and today, and saying that. Calling on Israel to stop its bombardment of Gaza, and calling on the U.S. to end its funding of Israel's terror.
Hey, stop killing the children.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not terrorists.
But you can't get anyone in Congress to take that view. I mean, you have Rashida Tlaib, right? But I mean, you've got Bernie Sanders saying the most horrible, things. It's like all anti-Hamas propaganda, and AOC is bad, right? People that you would think that are on the more left end of the spectrum have not been helpful at all.
Sanders has
that's true. That's true.
Occasionally come out on some of the things. He may be against Hamas, but he did come out and condemn some of the
But he doesn't want to condition the aid, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, it's terrible, we have to stop it, but we have to keep sending them weapons. It's basically the same line that the Biden administration had. Oh, we're doing everything we can to stop this horrible thing that we're so crying about every day, and but we have to defend Israel. We have to keep on sending them weapons so they can keep doing it. And it's just maddening because it's propaganda, because they're not that dumb, and they haven't brainwashed themselves to that extent. They know they're lying to you.
Well, they're driven internally by some religious fanaticism that's very tied up with a belief that these are the last days, approaching the end of time, and that they can actually take actions that will usher in the return of the Messiah or the coming of the Messiah. These extremist Jews like Ben Gavir and Bezalel Smotrich, they really truly believe that the Messiah will come.
Yeah.
And they can create the conditions that will bring the Messiah.
Yeah. The third temple
the irony
people.
Is they're enabled by a lot of Westerners who are evangelical Christians who insist that that this is prepping the way for the return of Jesus. So the return of the Messiah, which the average Jews reject. He's not the Messiah. He's just some Jew who claimed he was.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got those folks that are like truly religious fanatics, and then you've got people that are probably compromised by Epstein files. You've got people that just are chicken and want to keep getting money and don't want to get primaried with AIPAC funding the other side. There's all these convergent things, and you wind up with, and you've got people that just simply believe stuff that they've read in the media, and it's like the media headlines are so grossly distorted. I mean, and there was something like this that occurred. It wasn't just today, but it was like will the recent Israeli strikes put at risk the delicate ceasefire? It's like look, they just. The fact that there's no ceasefire if they're like conducting like mass attacks, right? It's like well, you think the ceasefire will hold after those mass attacks by Israel?
The ceasefire.
I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Dropping U.S. supplied 2,000-pound bombs on civilian areas and killing the civilians without any regard for whether they're combatants.
Hang on a second. I have that way too loud. We've got 20 seconds left, so. Well, actually, we're not going to have time to really say much in the last few seconds. So I just want to thank you, Larry Johnson, for being on the program, and it's always a pleasure.
Thank you for the invite. You guys stay warm up there.
We will. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Support for River Rats Radio comes from the